Thousands of jobs saved at the Port Talbot steel plant. It'll stay open for at least 5 years with £1 billion invested, but workers' pensions will be hit.
It's not going to be easy and there's going to be some tough times ahead. But if the unions stick together and the workforce stick together, we've proved what we can do.
Also tonight, the football abuse scandal widens. New allegations about an English coach in Malta and a former club physio in Scotland.
Claims that failures in the way fires are investigated could be allowing unsafe cars on the road.
And taking to the seas one final time, HMS Illustrious on her final voyage to the scrapyard.
This is the ITV Evening News with Charlene White and James Mates.
Good evening. The jobs that represents the livelihoods of 4,500 steel workers and the lifeblood of an entire South Wales community have been saved in a new deal unveiled tonight. Unions announced they'd reached agreements with the steel producer Tata to secure the future of jobs and production at Port Talbot for at least 5 years.
But the plan, which also saves Tata's other steel plants across the UK, involves replacing the current pension scheme and still has to be voted through by workers. From the talks at Port Talbot, Rupert Evelyn has the story.
It was to be sold, even shut. But now there is a commitment to keep these blast furnaces running for 5 years at least. And with it comes a level of security that has been missing from these works. Tata wanted out, and now they're staying in. For those who've negotiated this deal, it's been quite a journey that has led to a place few would have predicted when they started.
The commitment to the 5 years to 2021, but within the investment plan, there's further investment in the furnace that can extend that way beyond the 5 years, and then we're into new technologies. We're into, at that point of time, what the market's like, what how the global steel industry is, and hopefully we'll be in a better place. What this has done is secured production, 2 furnaces, for a period that then gives us time.
They promised to keep 2 blast furnaces running at the plant for at least 5 years, with a pact to keep jobs and avoid redundancies for the same period. Tata says it'll invest £1 billion in the plant over the next 10 years, but workers will have to accept reduced pensions as they move from a final salary scheme to defined benefits pensions. Steel workers have been fighting to protect jobs here for 8 months now. Although this is quite a turnaround, staff will need to absorb the details.
You know, it's been a long year, and hopefully there's a light at the end of the tunnel and we're getting close to that. But we'll see what comes out of the proposal, and hopefully it is some. Deep down, I hope it is something we can accept.
But there is still concern about how today's commitments will be kept if, as expected, Tata Steel Europe join forces with the German giant ThyssenKrupp.
But should you merge with another company or be bought out by another company, can you keep those guarantees?
If we are strong on our feet, nobody can move us.
You're not really answering the question, are you? If you merge with another company, which is the plan, will you keep the commitments that you've made today?
It will be stupid of anybody to close a plant which is profitable.
And it is making a profit right now?
Right now, it's not yet into profits.
Profitability here depends on removing the pension liability, and should this plan be approved, then given the right economic circumstances, they won't just make steel in Port Talbot, but money too.
Rupert, I'm sure there are celebrations there tonight, but is this anything more than a temporary fix?
Well, that's a difficult question to answer, but I think right now the honest answer is probably yes, it is. You know, this is a steel mill behind me, but it has been a rumour mill, and it will continue to be, because the workers really need to see the detail of what is being proposed today. £1 billion investment over 10 years sounds great, doesn't it? But where is that money going to be spent? That breaks down into 100 million a year, and across the steel industry, that money could be spent very quickly indeed. If the economic circumstances I talked about changed, if the pound changed in value, if China dumped more steel, all those sorts of things have an impact on this business and could send it into losses again. I spoke to a steelworker just a few minutes ago. I said to him, is this a champagne moment tonight? He said to me, I'm not sure it's that good. Perhaps a Prosecco one.
Rupert, thanks very much.
It is clear tonight that the football child abuse scandal, for so long concealed by a cloak of silence, has tainted more clubs than was at first thought. Tonight, ITV News can reveal that a Scottish football club has admitted it sacked an employee over abuse allegations, but did not report it.
And for the first time, new claims have emerged from overseas about another British coach who's already been named in historical abuse allegations. Our first report is from Sally Lockwood in Malta.
The scandal has now spread to Malta. Bob Higgins arrived at this training ground to coach youth players in 1989. He'd left the UK, and behind him concerns by the Football League about his behaviour. The MFA hired Bob Higgins the same year he left Southampton amid allegations of abuse by young players. But only today has a first alleged victim in Malta spoken anonymously about occasions in Higgins' car.
He would not let us sit behind him. We would have to sit on the passenger side at the back so he could look at us through the mirror, and he used to put his hand back and used to touch my leg.
Higgins had been a youth coach at Southampton in the 1980s, but left in 1989 amid concerns raised by the FA over his behaviour. The same year, Malta offered him a 5-year contract, but suspended it after the FA made them aware of the abuse allegations. In 1992, Higgins was acquitted of 6 charges against young boys, and he was reinstated in this post. He resigned just 2 years later, returning to Britain, where he went on to work for Peterborough United and most recently Fleet Town. Today, the MFA clarified what they did and didn't know about Higgins during his time with them.
As far as I'm aware, during Mr. Higgins' stay in Malta, we never had a whisper of any incident.
And now? Has anyone come forward?
Not yet.
This stadium and its grounds was where Bob Higgins coached youth players for more than 2 years. The MFA say they had no idea why he resigned in 1994 and that parents signed a petition calling on him to stay. Only now are allegations emerging that the coach they so wanted to keep may have been abusing children at the club. After his time here in Malta, Higgins continued to work in football for another 22 years, only losing his post 3 days ago when these new allegations emerged. Sally Lockwood, ITV News, Malta.
Meanwhile, the Scottish Premiership club Partick Thistle has admitted to ITV News it did not report a physiotherapist sacked over abuse allegations. Our correspondent Peter Smith is in Glasgow. Peter, what more can you tell us?
Well, it continues, James. Another club and another name. This time it's John Hart. He was a physiotherapist at Partick Thistle in the early 90s. Now, I heard about allegations against him. Those who have accused him didn't want to waive their right to anonymity and appear on camera, but I put their allegations to Partick Thistle, and today they have responded with a statement. They say that Partick Thistle has identified one case of historic allegation of abuse made against a former club employee who is now deceased. Now, I understand that is John Hart. They say the employee worked for the club for 2 years as a physio. As soon as the alleged abuse was raised in 1992, the club dismissed the individual with immediate effect. But crucially, James, they did not go to the police. And that meant that John Hart was able to continue working as a physiotherapist at his own private practice, to continue to treat people who had no idea about the sinister allegation that was hanging over him or the reason why he had been dismissed from Partick Thistle. And then, once again, in 1995, when he died, he appeared again at the club, this time in the official matchday programme. If you turn to page 21, there's a photograph of him here and a gushing obituary where they praise him as one of the best physiotherapists in the country and praise his incredible sense of humour, which apparently was marvellous for morale. Now, Partick Thistle say they have now reported this to Police Scotland and the Scottish FA for further investigation.
Peter, thank you very much indeed.
It's expected MPs will tonight vote in favour of the government's proposed timetable for beginning formal talks in March to leave the EU. But deeper divisions have emerged in today's Commons debate on Brexit about how much of its negotiating plan the government should reveal and whether MPs will be allowed to debate that. Well, our political correspondent Emily Morgan has been following the debate.
They wanted a plan. They wanted detail before the Prime Minister triggers our exit from Europe. Well, now there will be a plan for MPs and for us. But how detailed it will be, when we'll get it, and what it'll even look like is anyone's guess.
Order.
Today, the government agreed to publish something after backing a Labour motion. In return, they want agreement on the timescale. The man who kicked off the opposition debate claimed a victory.
Are any members of this House content not to know? Hands up who doesn't want to know. Doesn't want to know. Hands up. You don't want to know.
The document must be detailed enough for Parliament to scrutinise, he said, and published by January. But the Brexit Secretary was clear he needed wriggle room.
The government must have the flexibility to adjust during negotiations. It's like threading the eye of a needle. If you've got a good eye and a steady hand, it's easy enough. If somebody jogs your elbow, it's harder. If 650 people jog your elbow, it's very much harder.
Tory Europhiles, though, lined up to demand substance, not soundbites.
Will he accept that the House requires a description, published in a white paper preferably, of the strategic objectives that the government is going to be pursuing?
I want a white paper. I want legislation. I want to go through the lobbies and make a difference about our relationship with the EU to secure a strong future for everybody and for generations to come.
The SNP won't be backing the so-called plan. They want a formal role in negotiations to reflect Scottish views.
No answers is not, Mr Deputy Speaker, a black Brexit or a white Brexit. It's not a red, white or blue exit. No answers is a yellow Brexit. It's a cowardly Brexit. It's a Brexit that shows this government has absolutely no idea where it's going.
Whatever the plan, whenever it comes, get used to these scenes. This Brexit debate isn't the first, and it certainly won't be the last.
Well, MPs are voting on that motion now. It will go through and has saved the government some embarrassment. I think what's perhaps more interesting is the amendment that the government has put to this motion, asking MPs to back its timetable to trigger Article 50. We know that the Lib Dems and the SNP are going to vote against that. Soon we'll have a list of other MPs who've been forced into a position and are perhaps willing to delay Brexit. It's not legally binding, but it's politically interesting.
Emily, thank you.
And Scotland joined the battle of the Supreme Court today over who should have a say about leaving the European Union. On the third day of the legal challenge over Brexit, Scotland's top legal officer said leaving the EU would have such an impact on the powers of the Scottish Parliament that its consent is needed before Article 50 is triggered.
Meanwhile, a man has been arrested on suspicion of making racist threats to Gina Miller, the businesswoman bringing the Brexit challenge against the government. Police said a 55-year-old man from Swindon was held on Monday over claims he made racially motivated threats against Ms Miller online.
And the drugs manufacturer Pfizer has been fined a record £84.2 million by the UK's competition watchdog for overcharging the NHS for anti-epilepsy drugs. The distributor Flynn Pharma was also fined after prices were increased by more than 2,500% back in 2012.
Retreating rebel forces in the devastated Syrian city of Aleppo are pleading for a ceasefire so that up to 500 badly wounded residents can be taken to safety.
The leaders of 5 world powers also joined the call for an immediate truce so humanitarian aid can reach thousands of civilians still trapped in the war zone. The call for a 5-day truce came with government troops now controlling at least 2/3 of rebel-held eastern Aleppo. Today they recaptured the area around the citadel in Aleppo's historic Old Town. Our international editor, Raghi Omar, has the latest on Aleppo under siege.
These are the last final days of rebel-held eastern Aleppo, and it's being crushed without mercy. Syrian government forces, supported by Russia and Iran, continue to pulverize eastern Aleppo, which has now effectively fallen in all but name. It's why today's statement by Western leaders, including Theresa May, condemning Assad's forces and Russia for what it calls a humanitarian disaster and urging a ceasefire, only goes to show their impotence. Assad and his supporters stand on the brink of retaking Aleppo. Why would they stop? And who could stop them? Activists in eastern Aleppo say the situation is now hellish.
We don't have enough medicine. We don't have
hospitals, except just one in service. We don't have enough fuel. The people here are looking for the broken furniture for warming.
Syrian government troops moved through the old city of Aleppo, the highly symbolic district that rebels took 5 years ago. Tonight, President Assad said Aleppo was the last hope of the rebels. Its recapture would change the whole war, and he ominously vowed to take back all rebel-held Syria. Syrian state TV propaganda showed civilians being evacuated from parts of the city, but Western leaders say this is a sham and that the Syrian government and Russia are blocking aid from getting through to around 200,000 civilians who only have one functioning medical facility left in eastern Aleppo. But in reality, Assad retaking Aleppo will not bring the end of Syria's war closer. In fact, it'll make the search for peace more difficult, as rebels feel abandoned by the West and see no choice but to fight to the end, however long that takes. Raghi Omar, ITV News.
Well, still to come on the ITV Evening News, dozens of top footballers are being investigated over potential irregularities in their tax affairs.
And Lusty's last voyage, one of the Navy's best-loved ships, says goodbye. First, one of Britain's most popular cars is tonight at the centre of calls for a shake-up of how vehicle fires are investigated. It comes after a small number of Vauxhall Corsas were recalled, though the company says there is no evidence to support fears that others could be unsafe. But, especially after the fire problem with Vauxhall's Safira model, experts are warning of gaps in the system for investigating car fires. More from our consumer editor, Chris Choi.
This Vauxhall Corsa burst into flames. Nobody yet knows why. Today there are calls for drastic changes in the way car fires are investigated to ensure lessons are learned.
What would you have done if you'd had a child in the seat with a seatbelt on? It's really, when you, at the time you probably didn't think about that, but when you reflect on it afterwards, it's really scary what could have happened.
There are 18,000 vehicle fires a year across all manufacturers. In April, Vauxhall recalled 2,767 Corsa D Black Edition models with 1.4-litre turbo engines. That was due to a fire risk. But over 700,000 other Corsa D models were sold in the UK, and some owners fear the recall should go further. The car maker says Vauxhall is not aware of a fire risk to any other variant of Corsa D. This car was not covered by the current Vauxhall recall, and its owner is worried that the cause of this remains unknown.
The petrol tank is in the front of the car, so I thought we were putting the lives of people in danger, not only ours, but the neighbours too.
They allowed the car to be taken away. They allowed it to be scrapped. They never physically inspected it.
The Corsa is Britain's second most popular model, so tens of thousands of owners could be concerned by these reports of fires, and they'd expect every single unexplained incident to be thoroughly investigated. This is the now recalled Vauxhall Zafira B. The company only found out about many incidents due to media reports. Insurers don't have to notify manufacturers of fires. Now there are calls for a new database.
I'm not saying we can rule out every car fire, but certainly it would be a lot better if manufacturers and consumers could spot any trends that were happening quickly, so they could make any changes that were needed.
This Corsa was recalled, but the fire happened before. Learning lessons more rapidly is vital, and many believe that requires urgent change. Chris Choi, ITV News.
And to find out if your car is potentially affected and what you should do next, head to our website, itv.com/news.
The families of the rock band Viola Beach were told today the cause of the crash which killed them will never be known. An inquest heard how their manager drove their van off a bridge in Sweden as they returned from playing at a music festival, killing everyone on board. But as Damon Green reports, neither drink nor drugs were involved, so why remains a mystery.
They wanted answers. The families of 5 young men, 5 inseparable best friends who died together. But today a coroner told them the cause of the events that led to those deaths may never be known. Chris Leonard, Jack Dakin, Tommy Lowe and River Reeves were the band Viola Beach. In February this year, they were making their very first foreign tour to Sweden. Today, a court was shown CCTV of their car, this black Nissan, on its way back from a late-night gig. The flashing at the top of the picture, the warning lights of a lifting bridge which was being raised. Seconds later, their car had crashed into it and plunged underwater after passing a series of warnings and bursting through 2 barriers at around 50 miles an hour. The driver, Craig Tarry, the band's manager, had even mounted a verge to overtake 2 lanes of queuing traffic. Nobody knows why. Tests showed no drink or drugs in his body.
We don't know. We don't know the final answer with any definitive logic in terms of what actually happened at those moments just prior to the final collision.
The father of one band member told the court his son had died doing something he loved with people he loved being with. That is how they'll be remembered. Damon Green, ITV News, in Warrington.
The taxman revealed today that dozens of footballers from several leading British clubs are being investigated over potential irregularities in their financial affairs. The inquiry centres on so-called image rights, by which top players earn large amounts of money for endorsing commercial products and the like. Well, our business editor Joel Hills is here. Joel, this sounds like quite a hornet's nest.
Well, quite. MPs, James, unusually we're talking to the taxman about football because at the weekend you may have seen Jose Mourinho and Ronaldo were accused of avoiding millions of pounds in tax. Allegations both men denied. But HMRC today revealed that it has launched an investigation into how footballers in Britain are paid. And it told us that over the last 2 years, it has managed to recover £158 million from players it decided were abusing the tax system. Their investigation continues. It told us that 43 players, 8 agents and 12 Premier League clubs are part of an ongoing inquiry. Now, if HMRC decides there has been an attempt to avoid paying tax, they can impose pretty hefty fines.
158 million in yield in the last 2 years is not a small amount. So clearly this is the classic place where we have high incomes earned, mobile people, international issues where we pay very close attention with specialist experts.
So, James, at the heart of this are image rights. Footballers aren't just paid for hoofing a ball around a pitch. Their image has a value to the club too, and they exploit it by putting names on the back of shirts and so on and so forth. Now, top players can earn up to £300,000 a week, and the tax system allows them to take some of this income as image rights and pay a lower rate of tax as a result. The problem is HMRC's found out that money suddenly is straying abroad into offshore jurisdictions, and tax isn't always being paid. Their investigation ongoing. We're trying to find out who the clubs are. Arsenal has said it is not involved.
That's one bit of information. Thank you, Joel.
Finally, there was a rousing salute by sailors of all ranks, from ratings to admirals, but it could not disguise the sadness of today's final farewell to the aircraft carrier HMS Illustrious. The 22,000-ton ship, known affectionately as Lusty, was pulled by tug-outs of Portsmouth Naval Base and into the Solent for her final voyage. Civilians joined sailors at the waterside to pay their respects as Illustrious passed on the way to her final destination, a Turkish scrapyard.
Illustrious was decommissioned 2 years ago. Once boasting the latest in naval technology, she fetched just £2 million in scrap value. She first entered service in 1982 in the Falklands War, and the 32 years Illustrious spent with the Royal Navy also included operations off Iraq.
That's it for now. Tom is here at 10.
For more of the team here, good evening.
Bye.